in MUNing 101 series. I am Yana Lathar, and we are so excited to have you all here today. Please don't hesitate to drop your questions in the chat during the session, and we'll definitely get back to you. Team Debater is an organization dedicated to revolutionizing debate, education, access, and activity for schools and students across India. We want debate to be a powerful tool for social mobility, change, and make it accessible for free. We aim to enhance your critical thinking skills, expand your worldview, and also go beyond debate and build a community. The speakers for this session will be CV Umadi from Management Committee and Avira Bhatt from the Organizing Committee, two exceptional mothers from the Team Debater Club.
Hi everyone, this is Siri. So glad to be here. So let's discuss the last stage of the Modern United Nations conference, right? These are going to be a few very exciting days of the conference because you're at the last stage and this is where the real game begins. Um, when you enter the last day of, let's say, your 3-day MUN, you will feel that tension cut through the room. It's going to be an intense atmosphere. There's going to be urgency in the air. There's going to be a lot of engagement happening. But why, right? If we could please go to the first slide. If you could keep going in the PPT, please. Yeah. So these final sessions are very important in an MUN. You need to make crucial decisions, all of them leading to the conclusion of the committee and the product of the committee, right? Now, you enter basically the pinnacle of the MUN, and now comes the preparation of the final document, right? This document is going to represent all the research you've done, all the preparation you've done, all the time and effort you've put in, all the lobbying you've done, all your speeches, etc., etc. And you need to now finalize your proposals and do the extreme work that's going to come for you, right? Negotiations are going to be more intense. There's going to be many more disagreements within the minute. And all the solutions you've talked about, all the proposals you've put forward, all of them come to the spotlight now. So what happens is all of those culminate and basically conglomerate into one single document. And this is called the final document of the committee, right? This document is going to have everything from what you think to what you suggest and what you now want to do. And when I say you, I mean the block as a person, okay? There can be multiple final docs, but your chair is going to be the one that's who's it's going to be up to, right? They're going to be deciding what all you're going to submit. And this is why the concept of blocks, which we already discussed, is going to become so important in the last few days. Because if you collaborate with the blocks effectively, if you leverage their strength to draft these documents, these will reflect the common objectives and priorities you have. So that is why you need to pool your resources, read all the drafted clauses written by your members, discuss them, improve them, coordinate them, align with them, and having this collective approach, as you already said in last session, doing this collective activity in an MUN is going to be a great way to increase this negotiating power, right? And to increase the likelihood of having this great document because of the mutual consensus in it. And because of this process, you can really strengthen the cohesion of the block's proposals and ideas, which are definitely going to increase your chances of your final document being accepted in the committee. And that is why you usually start your final few sessions with unmods, that is informal sessions, and then move into a formal session discussing these final documents. But don't worry, we will make you understand the flow of it later in the presentation as well. So in these unmods, negotiation is going to be a skill you need because when you're drafting these documents, you will have to negotiate the language, the content of each and every clause. Because what one delegate thinks is necessary could not be a great proposal to you, could not align with your ideas or your policies, right? So that is why negotiation is going to really come in when you have amendments, when you have DRs to discuss and on the floor. Okay, thus, so let's see what these final documents I keep talking about are before I tell you exactly what to do with them in committee. Could we please go forward? Yeah. So first, draft resolutions. any number of draft resolutions can be on the floor at once. This is a very important point. So, what is a draft resolution, right? So, these are documents that state the proposed solution of the issue, right? And these these also represent the agenda of those who wrote and signed it. The UN calls it resolutions, and when your document is up for voting and it passes, it becomes a resolution. But until then, it is a draft resolution. It is just a set of proposals that you have culminated, and the adopted DRs thus become just resolutions. So these draft resolutions will have sponsors and signatories. So sponsors will be the ones discussing the document in the formal session, right? And these are going to be the authors of the entire draft resolution. And you can definitely tell who is going to be a sponsor, who's going to fight to be a sponsor during the making of the draft resolution itself, right? So the next signatories are going to be the ones who will support the discussion regarding the DR on the floor, but they have no further obligation, right? And you cannot be both of them. You can either be a sponsor or a signatory. And your executive board will be the one setting the number of sponsors and signatories according to the size and nature of your committee. So if your DR does not have the required number of sponsors, it will be removed from committee. And we won't really be deep diving into the exact format, but there is a heading. And if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, there will be a heading followed by preambulatory clauses that have very special phrases to begin them with, which provide background information and let's say the context. So things like recognizing or acknowledging could be these phrases. And then we have the operative clauses that will be the actual content as in the recommendations or the proposed actions or the things you really want to bring forward in committee, right? And these also have special phrases again. And these DRs cannot be circulated in committee without the approval of any of these sponsors or signatories and the chairperson. Okay. And one more really important point is that if you want to remove yourself from being either a sponsor or a signatory, you will need to send a request in written form to the chair once the paper has been given to the chair. Okay. Moving forward. Also, guys, if I'm going too fast, just drop in a message in the chat box, or any questions you have about anything I'm saying, just drop in a message in the chat box. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, just drop in something in the comments and we'll definitely get back to you, okay? Working papers. So personally, my favorite. In many official MUNs, yes, so sorry. In working papers, so when all is said and done, these are the documents that are going to be your preliminary documents, right? These are going to be formalized into a draft resolution you wish to work, if you wish to do that. So their purpose is to basically quicken your resolution process without having the stress of a proper structure, right? So it's basically a starting point for your block to bring out more clauses, more perspectives, and more points for debating as to be put into the DR. So yeah, working papers also talk a lot about giving an overview, context, and outlining the proposed solutions, but they are non-binding, very important. And it need not have a proper list of signatories and sponsors, but it needs to have the names of the people who proposed it, the delegates who proposed it, and their countries, right? Some chairs do prefer having it in a similar format to a DR. So again, it's up to the discretion of the chair. The amendments. So a document or a change you want to bring into the draft resolution, which either modifies something, deletes something, or revises something in the draft resolution, that is an amendment. So these can be proposed on any part of the DR, because once a DR is accepted by the chair and is on the floor in committee, it will be open for amendments. And many delegates will have ideas to modify something or delete something. And once actually, instead of having documents or written amendments, in one of my committees, we had verbal amendments, again, up to the discretion of the chair. All of this is there in the ROP, which is rules of procedure, and every single committee has to follow the rules of procedure. These amendments often relate to like the content of the clause. A few delegates actually raised a non-substantive amendment, which is like, oh, they're missing a comma over there, oh, they're like, that's a wrong full stop, and all of that. And yes, it's taken very strictly in DRs if there's like grammatical errors or whatever. But I wouldn't advise it because you can just tell the chairs to fix it then and there, and there's no need to make a whole document about it, right? There's no set number of amendments you can submit, but there will be a set period of time given for you to write them. Okay. And that's why time management becomes so very important. And we've talked about this in the last session and how to exactly manage your time. You'll be discussing with the signatories of the document. And then once you feel like, okay, I've gathered a good number of people who support my amendment and my idea of the amendment, you can submit the amendment to the EB. And once they accept it, the amendment is introduced in committee. And once it is introduced, it will be deemed if it's friendly or unfriendly because in basic rules of procedure, there's two types of amendments, friendly or unfriendly. Friendly amendments are the ones that are accepted by all sponsors of a DR, no matter how many. So they all agree that this amendment is good and we are going to take this amendment and accept it. Unfriendly amendments are the ones where one sponsor, even if it's one sponsor who does not agree with it, then these amendments are debated upon and then voted upon, right? And if you feel before the voting, this may be an amendment that won't be getting the support of the House, you can withdraw it by sending a like written request to the EB. That's all. And one more very important thing about amendments, you cannot give amendments on working papers at all. And yeah, because of this longer process that is inculcated in amendments, a lot of MUNs or EBs decide to skip it as the time gets closer to the final few hours. But yeah, moving on to the discussion process. Yes, so the flow of the committee goes as is. The chair will introduce the working paper or draft resolution and introduce the sponsors who wrote it. They'll come onto the dais and the delegates will have an open floor for debating the document as a whole now. And when presenting it, the delegates will either read the document on their laptops by themselves or either the sponsors will be introducing it to them, which is more preferred. The latter is more preferred by many EBs or many delegates as well. And then there's a lot of negotiation and compromise, many POs that are just bursting all over the committee because their aim now is to attack your DR. Their aim now is to attack your working paper and find every single weakness in it. Avira, can you take up what happens moving forward?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, 1 second. Yeah, so the discussion process, as Siri has been talking about, and why all of this is 1 second, let me just spotlight myself. Yeah. So the discussion process, we've been all talking about the voting and amendments, adoption of the document. Siri, we've covered this, right?
Yeah, but you can go over it again. I've done till open floor for debate. So if you could give them a good idea of what happens after that.
Yeah, all right. All right. So then also there's after open for from debate, there's like negotiation and compromise, right? And where does this negotiation and compromise really take place? That's your unmoderated caucuses. Now, obviously, you can take place in negotiation and all of that through chits. We've talked about this multiple times on how to utilize your chits properly, but the main negotiation and compromise, especially when it comes to your DR, is done in your unmoderated caucus. That is when you're allowed to, open up your laptop without internet and really discuss things and talk about what you're going to do. And we're also going to talk about in many other sessions why negotiation and compromise is important, but we're going to further highlight it here again. And also that's basically where the negotiation and compromise happens. It's mostly discussion based, and this is something that the chair takes a note of. So make sure that you're like always being there and like being present when there's negotiation and compromise, when there is discussions on the DR, because if you're just in your own world, then there's not going to be any fruitful discussion taking place. Then there's furthermore is voting. So voting happens and the DR at least right towards the end. So usually you can present it or maybe on the second day as well, but most DRs are presented right at the end of the MUN, and then it's basically passed, right? So what we have to ask ourselves again, what are we here in this MUN to do? I as a country, or I as a delegate of a country, want my country's values and morals and our agendas to be pushed forward as compared to other conflicting agendas. So my DR, so my whole point of being in this MUN is to get my DR passed. And that happens at the end of the MUN. That happens when the chair will ask people to vote. People outside your block can vote as well, but this is also why big blocks are usually looked as more powerful, because they'll garner more votes. But also as a small block, you can really also get more on voting as well. So yeah. And then lastly is the adoption of the document. So at the end of all of this, this whole conference, if your document is adopted, then it's going to get like actually implemented in real life. Like, for example, if I'm on a council which is talking about the Israel and Palestine conflict, and I get an amendment passed that like Israel has to do a ceasefire, then that will actually be adopted from now on, because that has been passed by majority of countries, and that whole of the adoption of the document goes place. That's why your documentation needs to be really, really specific and really, really in depth, because simply saying that sentence doesn't make any sense, right? You need to go how, why, who, where, all of that. And that's what really matters in the discussion process, and also talking about how that's going to go about. So if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, so then preparing for resolutions, right? That's really, really important. First of all, you can't really prepare for resolution because like beforehand, before the MUN starts, because you don't know what type of people are going to be there. You can have a basic plan like, okay, as Lebanon, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to get these countries on my side, which is nice. But a lot of times what happens is when those things don't go our way, we end up getting like really, really frustrated on all of this. So what I want you to know before you go to your MUN is just to know the structure of a resolution first. Then, create this whole plan of how you're going to do the resolution. So firstly, what are preambulatory clauses, right? These are clauses that basically give information on what has already happened and what are already treaties that have taken place, documents that are already there. For example, if I'm in a council which is talking about the environment, then I'm going to list a preamble talking about the Paris Agreement, because that was a really, really important thing when it came to the environment. So preambulatory clauses are firstly for two things. One, to know that you have like background knowledge and know what is the current state of the world and how previous negotiations have gone. And two, to also know that you recognize them. So a lot of times we've talked about this, but like when we talk about the specific semantics of it, you like recognize preambulatory clauses or like note preambulatory clauses. So these are things that you want to say that, okay, I am aware of this information and I know of these documents and I know of these treaties and I adhere to them, I know of them. A lot of times preambulatory clauses also like give aid to the UN Charter and all of that. So it's just making sure that in the document, like making the person who reads your document know that you know all about what you're talking about. And there, by the way, all of these elements that we're going to talk about are necessary, so you can't just skip out on preambulatory clauses. You need to do them. Second are operative clauses. Now, operative clauses are the actual thing that you want to achieve from your DR. So these are the actual laws that you want to get passed. These are the actual, not laws, but like the actual treaties that you want to get passed, the actual like change that you want to implement. That's going to be in your operative clauses. Usually in your DR, your operative clauses are the main part of your DR, because that's where you're talking about how are you going to take the steps, what are the steps you're going to take, with who are you going to take the steps, who's going to fund the steps, and all of that. And I recently put out a daily resource on how you can fund your operative clauses as well. So if you want to check out our Discord channel, please be sure to do that, because we giving like daily tips every day. Daily tips. We have a huge like branch of people working on these tips and really providing you in-depth information. So be on the lookout for all of that. Then there's also talking about sponsors, right? So what are sponsors and what are signatories? This depends from MUN to MUN. Firstly, now what are sponsors, right? So sponsors are people who have contributed to drafting the resolution, and they're listed at the beginning of the resolution. So in sponsors, you'll be like Lebanon, US, China, Russia, Syria, and those are going to be your sponsors. But your signatories, on the other hand, are people who are involved in the resolution but have not been like directly writing it. So like they want to basically see it be passed. They want to hear it out, basically. Be like, okay, I'll give you a chance to present your resolution. A lot of times conferences have limits, have like guidelines of how many sponsors, who can be sponsors, if you can like be sponsors to multiple DRs. So be sure to check your conference guidelines before to make sure that you know, you're adhering to it, because even if 10 people worked on a DR, a lot of times conference is only around 5 people, and then there's a lot of discussion and on who's going to be a sponsor, who's going to be signatory. That's all really interesting. But just make sure you check your conference's guidelines before also structuring a resolution, because a lot of times conferences will also require specific things from your resolution. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah, formatting guidelines. So we've sent like in a past, in the last like obsession that we had on the MUNing 101 series, we talked specifically about these formatting guidelines as well. But these formatting guidelines are imperative, like you need them. And a lot of times if you don't use them, you lose out on marks. So you can go through our past, you know, videos to talk about how we talk about this formatting. But like you should have firstly a header on the top of each page, like for example, with your committee name, your topic, maybe like a acronym that you have for the group that you've started to create this DR. Then also like use like descriptive titles to organize your content, which is really good. This is not necessary, this is just a tip. Furthermore, during discussion, it's really good to seek feedback on the format as well. So for example, you know, when you write a book or you write an article, you have, you know, fact checkers and also like beta readers and editors. So even if you don't have people who are like actively working on solutions, you can divide up work and say like, okay, I'm going to write all of this down. This person's going to format it, this person is going to, you know, make it so that there's no spelling errors and all of that, because that stuff is really important. So it's really good to make like seek feedback from your peers and advisors to like improve the cohesion. A lot of times chairs will also like just answer a lot of tips and questions if you go up to them and ask them during an unmoderated caucus, which is really good. Furthermore, this is really important, but you need to maintain consistency in your formatting. If you're going to keep your font size as 12 times New Roman, you can't keep it as Arial in another side, right? And if you're going to keep 2 spaces between each point, those 2 spaces have to be maintained. Like you're literally like representing an entire like country, and you're like creating like a government like type of report. So in that, obviously you're going to be really formal and you're going to adhere to the guidelines and all. You're not going to be super using colorful text and like not making it like, you know, clear and paragraphs and concise and everything. So that stuff is really important. And during discussions, dividing up tasks, talking about formatting, getting help from people is really important, because you cannot write your DR on your own. DR is a group project, and unless you want to be the one who does all the work, which is not supported in MUNs, because you're supposed to do leadership, not all of it. Those are two different things, which we've also talked about in our sessions. But you really need to look at these formatting guidelines and make sure everything's in place. If you could go to the next slide then. Yeah, all right. So drafting techniques, right? So there's different drafting techniques, but these are things that you need to like make sure that you have in place, or else it's not a good draft. Since this is like this seems pretty obvious, but we're doing a 101 series and we just really want to emphasize this. Firstly, you want to make careful attention to like the diplomacy, the clarity. If you, for example, make some offhanded comment about another country and you add that in your DR, that's going to be really disrespectful, also going to ruin all the allies of that country are not going to vote for your DR. A lot of things are going to happen. And for example, if you're not making like, if you're making a run-on sentence and you're not really like formatting stuff clearly, just because you write a lot of content doesn't mean you need to roam around it. Make it effective and concise, but add a lot of new unique points. Furthermore, obviously no like offensive, inflammatory marks. You need to respect everybody. You need to respect countries. Again, you're like a diplomat. You need to be diplomatic. And lastly is inclusive language. So try to make sure your policies firstly align to all stakeholders' concerns. For example, if you're in your moderated caucus, a key issue is talking about gas emissions. Make sure you talk about gas emissions and acknowledge everyone. So like even if you're giving different policies for developing and developed countries, you're still talking about both, right? Don't just give policies on developed countries and don't give and like not give policies on developing countries. So you need to make sure that like you don't marginalize any groups, you don't use any sort of racial slurs and anything, and sort of like negative remarks, and make sure that you really include the whole committee when you're talking about your draft, because your drafting resolution is ultimately applies to everybody, like every single country. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so firstly, achieving consensus. So a lot of times when you're in your DR, you need to make sure that everyone agrees to every single point in your DR. If in your DR you have, okay, we're going to do this part and you're going to do that part, and we're just going to see what works out. Like, no, you have to make sure that every single point in your DR, down to the preambulatory clauses, are like agreed upon, because that's what gets communication points, that's what gets leadership points, and that's also what gets like being a team like player and team worker, because if you don't get consensus, then what type of leader are you, right? Then firstly, to get achieving consensus, obviously you need to actively listen to everybody. So what I like to do, if your conference allows it, I open up on my notes app right as I'm writing my DR. I keep like a split screen of my notes app, and on my notes app I keep adding points of interesting ideas that people have, or interesting things people want to do, or like, can I be a sponsor, can I be a signatory? I just write all of that down, and I am the one who mainly keeps a master document of everyone's worries, concerns, all of that regarding the draft resolution, so that we can get every single point across. You being a scribe is a really good way of you being a team player, and also being like a very important person in the MUN, because now you have all of the knowledge and all of the key players listed on one side. So active listening and noting down all of these listings, like, even if you listen but forget about someone's concern, then you're not a good leader, you're not a good team player, because you need to look at everyone in your block. And especially if you're in a large block, make sure that literally everyone's concerns are being met. And what another thing I really like to do in leadership is to give like people who don't speak as much parts. So for example, there are like 2-3 power delegates who keep like talking with each other. You can be like, okay, pause, you guys have been talking for way too long. Delegate of Paraguay, could you speak a bit more? Because I've not heard from you at all, and your inputs would be really useful. This firstly gets people more involved in your DR, and also makes people like you more, but also is very favorable to the judge. So always give chance to people who are not as speaking as much. Don't just hold all the attention to yourself. That's not what a good delegate does. That's not what a good diplomat does, period. If you could go to the next slide. You skipped one slide. Yeah. All right. Then we've talked about this again and again in MUNs. But compromise is super duper important in discussions as well. If you're in a discussion, you need to talk about what you're willing to give up and what you're looking to go past. Obviously, you still want to get the majority things there, and obviously you can't like negate on some core values. Like if you're America, you're not going to follow like communist ideology all of a sudden. So like you need to make sure that your core values are still in place, but please, please, please give space for different perspectives, for compromise, for all of that. Because again, a good delegate isn't a delegate that gets all of their stuff only for their country favorable, but also like builds relationships with other countries, gets them all looking as a more likable person. All of that is really super duper important. So like if you're just focusing on how to get your stuff done, that's not being a leader, that's not being a team player. You need to understand different perspectives, and that also like through compromise. So what does different perspectives mean? For example, if I'm the US, obviously I'm a pretty developed country. Looking at other perspectives is looking at perspectives of developing nations, looking at perspectives of small island nations. Taking that into account into my DR as well is so important, is so important in my discussions, because that shows that as the delegate of the US is making sure that I build good connections with everybody, and also is actually looking at benefiting everybody, not just myself. Then we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So navigating committee dynamics. So firstly, there's influential blocks, right? Firstly, there's a lot of blocks that are already like pre-made that work out in real life. Like for example, there's a block on small island nations. There's a block on Asian countries. There's a block on P5. There's a block on a lot of different types of blocks. There's a block on developing nations, developed nations. So there's a lot of influential blocks that can be there, but that doesn't mean you have to restrict yourself to these blocks. You can keep a block on however you like. I've had some blocks with people from all across the world, from developing or developed, but just have like a common goal. And that's what's really important in your block. Even if you are a block of all small island nations, but all of you can't even come to a consensus on what you want to write on your DR, then you're not a block. A block is someone which has like a clear objective and a clear goal in mind, right? Then secondly, pre-planned questions on your document. This is a really good way of like during a moderated caucuses for, okay, I'm gonna ask if someone delegate asks me this, I'm going to tell them that, or this is what I'm going to tell delegates who want to use nuclear power, or this is what I'm going to tell delegates who want to do this policy. You can, looking at the background guide, you can kind of like anticipate what type of comments will be like, what type of processes will take place and what type of discussions will take place. So if you already have a lot of questions and criteria almost that you want to get ticked off, that's really, really good, because then you won't have to think about it. You won't have to like scurry through like your thousands of files. You can just say it then, like, okay, if someone, when I'm talking about like hydroelectricity, brings up like other modes like coal, or like brings other renewable energy like solar, I'll immediately have like a rebuttal to give them, or immediately have questions to give them. And this also brings really good discussion, of course. Then again, we talked about different perspectives, but you can also outwardly show different perspectives in your committee. So for example, if I'm in my moderated caucus and I'm giving a speech, still giving nod to other countries, mentioning other countries, what they're doing well, supporting other countries, or talking about, as the US, these are my problems, but I also want to recognize that Middle Eastern countries might have these problems. This is a really good way to allow different perspectives, and also how you can really impact those perspectives as well. And that really makes you like a well-rounded delegate, right? And lastly is like forming clauses for your blocks document. Again, we've talked about this multiple times, but make sure they're clear, concise, and make sure that it'll like everyone agrees on it, because firstly, this will make it easier to defend your resolution as well, but also make sure you have proper reasoning behind each point. Like, if you're using nuclear power, why are you using nuclear power? What is specific about nuclear power? How this is going to benefit not just your country, but every other country? Make sure that it's very easy to support your DR, not just making clauses because they sound fancy, but because they actually get work done, and you actually have good arguments to support why you want to use that clause and why you want to put that on your blocks document. Next slide. That's it. All right. This was quite a short and snappy session, but we just kind of wanted to keep reiterating a few points or talking about a discussion of a few more. We can stop presenting right now, I guess. Thank you everyone who was able to join. Thank you again to the teen debater team who was able to support us throughout this. Thank you to Siri. Yeah. All right. I
I would
assume,
like to say that I love taking this whole session, especially with a person like Avira. Great friend, great peer, great delegate. And yeah, thank you for the team of Teen Debater. Thank you to everyone who's watching. And I hope we could help you all with all the MUN basics. We're definitely going to have a lot more sessions on a bit more advanced things. There's already sessions being done, being planned for
yeah.
more advanced things. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to still.
Yeah, I think this is the end of our MUNing 101 series, or
Yep.
yeah. So this has been our first series. Me and Siri have committed. This has been like done. This is one of the first series we, as an organization, have like really done and committed, aside from the debating 101 series. There's such a love for MUNs. You guys, we as an organization always want to support young kids, old kids, all people from all across the country to really build up an MUN, because we want to show that teenagers and all of that can get all of these things done. We're just teaching it to you guys, but it's really about applying all that knowledge. Again, we talk about the Discord a lot, but we genuinely put a lot of effort into our Discord. You can check out our website. You can check out how many people are in the Teen Debater, how many people are working behind the scenes. So we're putting out an MUN resource every day. We're putting out daily debates every day. And that's really what's going to help you apply all of this knowledge that we're telling you about when we're talking about navigation, negotiation, all of this. You need to apply that. I mean, it could go one year, come out the other, and that's really where we can also support you as well. I assume the series is for beginners, so just a word of warning that just because you don't win your first conference, because I didn't win my first conference as well. Almost no one wins their first conference, especially big ones. That's completely okay. You're competing against people who are even more advanced than us. So never feel bad about it, but please continue your love for MUNing, debating, because that's why we're here, because we all love, this type of knowledge, not just for college. All of that is fine, but also because we genuinely, at the last day of the conference, when our draft resolution gets passed, we have the biggest smile on our face. So yeah, thank you. Siri, anything else to add? Anyone else, anything else to add? Or otherwise I'll close the meeting.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the one of the biggest screams I've ever let out was probably when in my third MUN, my DR was passed. That was probably the loudest I've ever screamed. So yeah, it's a thrill and it's a fun and an amazing platform to be a part of. And yeah, the ending of this series does not mean we're not going to be in touch with you guys. We're always there on the Team Debater platform for you guys. And whenever you want to ask a question, whenever you need any help, just hop into the Discord community or the WhatsApp community. And right there at your fingertips, you have all of us to help you.
And
I
if you
think that's
want
all
to,
from my side.
yeah. And if you want to specifically talk to me or Siri, then you can just ping us on Discord as well. We're not super busy people. I mean, we have stuff to do, but we'll do our best to come back to you if you're like, hey Avira, I really like the session, or hey Siri, I really like the session, I would really talk about this. We're completely fine with that.
Yeah, we
I
love
think yeah, I think this is it then. Thank you so much. To all of those viewing on YouTube, thank you so much for also supporting our channel. Please follow us, please keep up with us. We give notices pretty short, we're trying to improve that, but these sessions, just getting them, if you were here with us right now, we could also answer questions, ask questions, all of that. So joining sessions is actually much more interactive for us as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna close out now. Thank you so much. Thank you also to
Thank
like
you.
Avish and Nayanika and all of them for that. So thank you.